Great. Over to you. Thank you.
Perfect. Great. Okay. Well, thank you for attending today. I hope you're having a good day so far. Lots of good sessions, lots of stuff on marketing, which is something I really need to sort of look into in a bit more detail. But in this session, we're going to be moving back onto the sales module. We're going to take a look at how you can go about implementing a custom pricing engine using the application. So first of all, we'll give you a bit of an overview. Okay, well, what do I mean by custom pricing plugins? You know, the why, what, and hows in terms of their usage and stuff like that. We're then going to jump into a sort of a real scenario. We're going to build out a build in a very sort of loose sense of the word, obviously due to time constraints. You know, we want to maybe skip some steps ahead, but we're going to build out a custom pricing solution, show you the steps involved as part of setting things up, and then we'll finish off with just some closing thoughts and remarks in terms of things just to watch out for if you are considering adopting a similar solution yourself in the future. Yep, so a little bit about me there on the slide. So I'm director of a small Microsoft Gold partner based in the northwest in the UK, in and around Manchester. I've been working with Dynamics for about 4 or 5 years now. So my background's more on the Office 365 and SQL background. These days doing quite a lot with Azure and Power BI as well, amongst everything else. Yeah, so that's me in a nutshell, I think. Okay, but this session is about me. It's obviously about the community. We want to make sure that you guys are getting some good stuff out of the session. So please, in the chat, unmute yourself. Please tell me about you. What is your experience? Have you done any development work before using .NET? Are you more on the functional side? You know, when I say C#, do you think I'm talking about musical notes? Please feel free just to let me know in the chat in terms of what your background is and experiences when it comes to these sort of things. No sales knowledge. Oh, you know some sales, Cheryl. I'm pretty sure you do. Okay, so
not much, honestly.
It's all the same. It's all the same, isn't it, Cheryl? Underneath the hood. Okay, right. So yeah, career transition to CRM domain. Okay, so functional. Bit of experience with the sales. CPQ solutions. Okay, so I'm guessing from the looks of it, maybe more on the functional side. So what we're going to be looking at, we are going to be looking at code today. We're going to be going step by step through that, so we'll try and just explain the concepts as we're going along, and if you've got any questions in terms of things, you know, being looking quite complicated, you're going, okay, what's that over there, then let me know in the chat, and we can have a chat about it afterwards and hopefully get your questions answered. Okie dokie. Right, so let's jump back onto here. Okay, so they always say with any presentation, start with a story. So once upon a time, I was approached by a client. They needed some help with a particular scenario, and the situation was that they were sort of in pricing hell. They'd tried to implement a working solution so they could basically use the sales module, have all of their various products, you know, opportunities, quotes, etc., generated from the system, but they also wanted to start factoring in sort of custom entity values, custom fields, attributes. They had very specific custom calculations that they wanted to do, and they were really getting nowhere with it. It was just turning into a complete and utter mess for them. So effectively, the job that I had was to sort of come in, interrogate this in a bit more detail, and just find out exactly what's going on. And it became pretty clear quite quickly in terms of what some of the main issues were. You had, I guess, what you would perhaps term a sort of workflow Armageddon. So, you know, this gives you sort of a feeling in terms of what it was, but really in actual fact, it was probably more times 4, literally having a workflow covering pretty much every single sales entity in the system, all doing a little bit of functionality there, setting the value here, updating the value over there, just a complete and utter nightmare to sort of view and maintain and things like that. To add insult to injury as well, actually sort of looking around in the customizations, you know, new everywhere. So clearly somebody had not been, you know, following the sort of the approved process in terms of having a solution publisher prefix and things like that. So it's probably fair to say after my first day, you know, this was probably my reaction after looking in the system, you know, a little bit sort of frustrated, trying to sort of think, okay, well, what can we do here to try and get this sort of working? You know, and we've highlighted this already in terms of what the problems are here. It's worth just focusing in a bit more detail on them now. So I think when it comes to any solution that you're building with Dynamics 365, you should be going functional wherever you can. It's going to help you along. You're not going to have to go into a protracted development cycle. You're not going to have a dependency on, a custom code or an individual in terms of a solution that's been built. You're doing things in a supported way. So I'm all for functional solutions, but when you're effectively trying to get an existing system like Dynamics 365, you're trying to sort of almost reverse engineer it around to meet your needs. And you're doing it in a rather sort of what I would term sort of cack-handed functional way. That's when things can start to get problematic, and you're in a situation where you've got, as I say, workflow Armageddon going on, no documentation around that to sort of add insult to injury. So it becomes very difficult for anybody new coming into the business or anybody trying to figure out what's going on here to actually figure out what's going on. So that's why I always say with functional solutions, just keep, go for them where you can, but just keep in mind that you don't want to be getting a system to do something that it's completely not built for, or where another solution might be better. Hard to this already, a bigger risk to the business. The solution has been sort of built out, sort of piecemeal over, let's say, 6 months. It's been added to, it's doing a bit here, doing a bit over there, very convoluted, very difficult to understand. And I think to sort of completely misquote a sort of famous phrase from Albert Einstein, I would probably say is, okay, well, if you can't actually express your business logic in less than 3 workflows, then really you don't understand it yourself. So if you do find yourself in the unfortunate situation where you have built out so many different workflows, Power Automate flows, all collectively doing one thing, then I'd probably be looking at that. So I go, well, hang on, you probably need to sit down and just reevaluate, okay, what am I supposed to be doing here? What is my business logic? What is my end result? And is there a better way in which I can encapsulate it and actually get it working in an optimized way? And I think, to sort of to finish things off, I think really when it comes to working with pricing in the sales module, when it comes to trying to sort of modify how that works out of the box, really, if you're going down the workflow route to sort of trying to achieve that, then you've got a really poor appreciation of what the application Dynamics 365 sales can do. And really, I'd probably say that's probably the greatest sin of all. You've not actually understood, you've not sat down and gone through the system and seen, all that it can do, and leverage that to your benefit potentially. So, as you can probably guess, when we go back to the sort of the situation I talked about a few minutes ago, came in and we looked at implementing a custom pricing solution to get around the issues. Now, we're talking about it a lot. What is it? Okay, so in essence, it's a mechanism where you can go into the Dynamics 365 sales module and completely replace how the default calculation engine works. So, you're probably familiar with this process in terms of when you create an opportunity, you add on your products and stuff like that. The system then goes through, totals up your line items, applies any discounts, tax, freight amounts, etc. It does all that for you automatically. What a custom pricing plugin will let you do is just completely ignore that, and instead you can execute your own bespoke logic whenever a sales document is being sort of worked on in the system. So because it's a plugin, it's something that somebody who's got some experience with developing plugins has to do, and it is essentially just like any other plugin that you would build for Dynamics 365 sales. You target what's the calculate price message as part of your operations, and that basically triggers when you do pretty much anything involving the sales entities. So whether you create, update, retrieve it, etc., all of that is encapsulated as part of this calculate price message. And in terms of the entities that it covers, it's these specific ones here. So it's basically all of your opportunity, quote, order, and invoice entities, and then all of the product, the line item records underneath that then triggers on. And in terms of when you're building out your custom logic, so typically you probably use C# for this. You can use visualbasic.net if you so choose. It is supported as part of the SDK, but generally these days you'll probably find people using C# where possible. So what are the sort of benefits that it can deliver? Well, because the plugin is accessing the SDK, you can leverage some of the capabilities within there. You can do potentially quite complicated things. You can retrieve a record. You can execute a batch process. There's all sorts of things that the SDK gives you that you're not going to be able to do potentially through a workflow, or even maybe perhaps these days through a Power Automate flow. So having that capability there is potentially very useful. And what it lets you do is, okay, so because you're essentially injecting your own logic here. Virtually any custom business logic can be applied at the sales calculation point, and you're not having to go in and be in a situation where you've got multiple processes firing off every time a record is created or updated. The calculate price message just sort of gives you that gateway into there to easily inject your custom logic. Potentially with all of this, it doesn't necessarily need to be the same calculations that apply for all of the entities. So for example, if you've got, let's say, some additional fields at maybe order invoice stage that you need to factor in, maybe calculate VAT at that point, maybe you've got some additional costs that need to go in at the back end, you can have a distinct set of calculations that apply for just those entities, and then a completely separate one for your opportunities and quotes as well. So again, giving you that fine tuning, being able to do it literally at a per entity level in terms of customizing your calculations. And then when we go back and think about what we talked about with the the workflow Armageddon, so really a plugin potentially offers you a way of being able to containerize complex logic in a solution. It's going to be in a plugin. It's going to be sort of transportable as part of your solutions and things like that. You can move it out to different environments. Alter its behavior at runtime using profiles and things like that. It's arguably an effective way of being able to get that logic into a nice compact form for you. And these days, typically, you may just be using model-driven apps to access a sales app, but these days it could be maybe that you've got a Canvas Power App that you're using. It could be maybe you've got other integrations happening at the sort of platform level. So potentially, when you're looking at a custom pricing solution, you can ensure that logic is always applied at that level. You're not having to, have write a bunch of functions in a Canvas Power App just to make sure your correct sales, sales calculations apply. As soon as the record hits the platform, it's going to sort it all out for you. So it's one less thing to worry about in the sort of grander scheme of things. So in terms of potential usage scenarios, then how you can potentially get some leverage out of this. So this one's probably a fairly common one. If you've got any sort of external integrations, so whether you're talking to systems maybe like F&O or maybe Nav, you need to maybe bring in price information from another system. You need to get some information from somewhere else and then factor it as part of your calculations. Because you're writing it out in a plugin, you've got that capability to call those APIs if you need to. Typically, when you're customizing the system, there'll be a whole bunch of fields that you need to add in to accommodate a particular business's needs and wants. So with a custom pricing plugin, you can quite easily factor in custom fields as part of your sales calculations when you're sort of getting those calculated. You've got capabilities as well because you're developing using the plugin. So for example, if people are filling out the sales documents wrong, maybe they forgot to put in a particular field, maybe we're in a situation where a product is being potentially sold under cost and therefore we're going to lose out on the deal if it goes forward. Custom pricing plugin, what we can do there is that we can have very tailorable bespoke error messages that sort of fire to the user to inform them that potentially you've got a business condition violated as part of that. Another potential thing, again, because you're using plugins, you've got capabilities at that level to do sort of before and after comparisons of your records. So if you need to just verify that a previous value that's been changed, make sure it's not gone over or under a particular value, again using the plugin and using your custom images, pre and post images, you've got the ability to be able to get that out. So really what I would say is that if you've got can develop these plugins, the world's your oyster, and potentially it's a much more attractive option to look at when you compare against the alternatives that a functional option will potentially give you. Okay, so in terms of getting started, then we need a few things. It's not something that you can just sort of necessarily start and sort of do straight away. You need to have an instance, so whether it's an online Dynamics 365 Dataflex tenant or even on-premise, this is fully supported for on-premise CRM systems as well. So you've got that option there. So obviously you need that first in place to begin with. In terms of building out your custom pricing solution, you're going to need access to Visual Studio. You're going to be writing code as part of this, so you need to be able to set up a new project and do all that sort of stuff. And then you're going to need the plugin registration tool as well to get the whole thing deployed out. And what I would say is, if you are considering looking at this, going down this route a bit further, I think it's useful to have some awareness and experience of the following. We're going to go through a sample shortly, which hopefully tries and cover things off if you're not too familiar with these areas. But I would say, okay, knowing a bit of code, C#, or if you're feeling a bit cruel on yourself, VB.NET by all means. Familiarity in terms of working with Nuget packages from a Visual Studio standpoint. Having some awareness of the SDK is potentially quite useful, because then you would know in terms of what you can do with it. It's not essential though. And then finally, the experience in terms of how you then deploy out plugins via the plugin registration tool. We're going to cover that specific thing off today in the demo. So hopefully you get a bit of familiarity in terms of how that all works. Okay. So in order to do a demo, we need a bit of a scenario then. So we've got our fictional organizations, whether it's called Contoso, Wingtip Toys, AdventureWorks. So they've decided, okay, we want to have a custom pricing solution. And we've sort of agreed and decided that it needs to sort of meet the following requirements as part of this. We want to make sure that we have product line item discount supply at the sort of the product line item level. In order to sort of help us along, so we're not having to get a calculator out each time and figure it out. We want users in the application to be able to specify a percentage value at the sales document level. That then will then feed across into the product line items, and based on the percentage that's calculated, that will then figure out, okay, I need to apply 10, 15, 20 pounds, whatever it is, discount on top of that. Next, we want to try and automate the process in terms of around our freight amounts. So we're recording in the system information about the various countries that we work with and how much it's going to cost us to ship out a product. So we want to just automate that stage. That's that stage of the process using this. And then finally, if we are in a situation where, going back to what I mentioned earlier, you are tempted to sell a product at below cost value, we want to show an error message to the user to inform of that. So in terms of what we built out already, we've got the functional aspects of the solution ready to go. We've got a model-driven app and things like that. We've also got the code as well, which we're going to go through and talk. So all we just need to do is just review and get this deployed out. And then hopefully, fingers crossed, if the demo god's not being too cruel, it should all work as expected. So the process for this, if you're sort of doing this in the sort of real life, then so you view your environment first of all. There's some specific things there's a specific setting that you have to disable or enable, depending on how you look at it, in order to start working with custom pricing in the first place. We then need to jump across to Visual Studio, build our plugin solution, make sure that we've got all the necessary configuration set up around that. We deploy it out using the plugin registration tool, and at that point we then tell the application, okay, we wanted to fire for the calculate price message at these specific points. And then finally, we give it a test, and fingers crossed, we're all sort of working. Okay, so appreciate that in the space of an hour, attempting to do just a full coding demo is probably almost literally impossible. So what I've got on my sort of GitHub page on there is the entire solution that we're going to be building out today is sort of available on there. So if you wanted to sort of either follow along now, later on, take a look at yourself, get onto the repo, clone it down. There's instructions on there telling you what you need to do. So hopefully you can work through all that. It gives you effectively a starter solution that you can build out further, and then a completed sample as well. So I'll leave that up just for a few more seconds, and then we can jump into building out the code. Okay. So I'm going to jump across into my Dynamics 365 instance over here. So we've got in here a model-driven app that's been built out. This is already good to go. We've added on all of our various entities on here, opportunities, quotes, products, etc., like that. We've also got a custom entity down here that we've defined. So this is storing our freight amounts. So all we're doing here is that for each city value, we're just storing effectively a key value pair for our name of our city, and then the cost of how much it will be to ship out to that particular location. So we're going to go back we'll see how that works when we deploy the solution in a few minutes. So at this point, then we need to, before we start building out the sort of solution, we need to disable the existing pricing in the system. At the moment, if I was to just go on here, I'm just going to create just a new test opportunity. I'm just going to go discount percentage over here. If I just save that, I'll add on just a single line item product. Oh, need a price list first. So I will do a writing on here. So my test writing product. So yep, so that should be all good. So if we save and close that, we can see that's calculating up as we sort of expect. So at the moment, it's working in the default manner that we want it to, but it's not doing the things that we want to in terms of the freight amount, the total tax, etc. So what we need to do is that we need to first disable the out-of-the-box pricing engine, and we do that by going into the classic interface. At the top in here, we go into our settings area on the sitemap in administration, go into system settings. Then if we click onto sales down here, we can see we've got an option here called use system pricing calculation. So when you spin up your instance for the first time, this will always be set to yes. And really, you don't want to be changing this setting unless you are going in and wanting to do something around custom pricing or overriding system pricing. So first things first, we need to just disable that. Press OK at this point. Now, if I go back onto my opportunity record now and I go on and try and add on a new product, so maybe just test product 2, as you can see, really imaginative with the, oh, didn't say that as a writing, really imaginative with the names today. It is a Saturday after all. Okay, so if I save and close that, we can see nothing's happened. So because we disabled that now, no calculations at all, whether it's opportunity, quotes, products, whatever it is going to fire. It's going to just be completely switched off. So, so as I say, it's not a setting that you want to be turning off lightly, but you will need to, because otherwise anything that we attempt to do following on from this in terms of deploying out a custom pricing solution is just not going to work. You'll just deploy the plugin out and the application will still use system pricing by default. So at this point, then we can jump across into Visual Studio. And what we've got in here, so I've basically just cloned down the sample that's on the GitHub page. And we'll take a look first of all in terms of the, we've got essentially 2 solutions in here. We've got a starter for 10. So this is basically just none of the logic that we've got defined, built out, basically just the bare bones of it all. Then we've got the complete solution up here. So I'll just talk through in terms of how we got to this particular point here with the starter plugin. We've gone into Visual Studio. We've set up a brand new new project. It will be of type C# class. So if I was to go into here, so what I would do is I'd go on here, class library for .NET Framework. I'd click on that, go through the instructions, give it all a name. Then at that point, it would then create me a brand new clean project. You'll just have an empty project that will just have a single class file in it. All you would need to do is just basically at that point is just change the name of it from class 1 to something more descriptive. So typically what I tend to do is I just name the classes in terms of what they're doing, just so I don't forget myself later on down the line. With your project set up, you then also need to make sure that you've set up your plugin so that it's signed using a strong name key value. In order to do this, you just go to the top up here into properties, go to signing down here, hit the box down here, and then we'll create just a new strong name key file for this. So I'll call this after the name of the particular project, custom pricing. Password is optional. You don't necessarily need to have it in order to basically deploy things out. So we won't worry about it too much today. I'll just press OK. Click save at the top up there. So now whenever we build this project on here, it's going to be signed using the strong name key value, and we'll then be able to deploy it out into the application. Without it, we're just going to get potentially errors because all assemblies need to be signed before you can register them up into Dynamics 365. So with all that done, then we then next need to look at then getting our various Nuget packages added on. So Nuget is basically a way of being able to pull in all sorts of different packages or existing frameworks that are out there, DLLs and things like that into your project. Have it so that if you need to restore to another location in the future, Nuget will just handle it all for you. You're not having to copy and paste across DLL files and things like that. So really, it's use Nuget as much as possible. It will really help you out. And what we've done in this project already is that we've added on 2 Nuget packages from Microsoft. We've got the core SDK assemblies down here. This is going to let us do our various platform level operations and give us access to all the stuff that we need. And the second thing it's done is that we've downloaded the plugin registration tool. So these days, if you're doing anything with the SDK and you're wanting to get the latest versions of the tooling, you'll need to go into Nuget. Previously in the past, you used to be able to download and download all of your various SDKs as just one big zip file from the Microsoft Downloads website. That's no longer the case. So regardless of whatever you're doing with the SDK from a dynamic standpoint, you are going to need to have some familiarity with Nuget. So as you can see, we've got the tools on here. We've actually got actually out of date a little bit on some of the tools, but the great thing about this is that, we can select any different version. We've got access to a whole bunch of useful stuff that's going to help us along when we develop. Okay, so with the Nuget packages added at this point, then we start to build out the plugin itself. So typically there's a whole bunch of boilerplate code that you need to add on when you're building out a plugin. So it usually involves you getting the context. If you're doing anything in terms of wanting to write out to the tracing service, so that when you're then diagnosing plugins that have been deployed out, you can write messages out and basically determine, okay, how far has a plugin got, has an error occurred or something else happened, etc. We've got some stuff in here to basically ensure that we are not caught in an infinite loop. Just a little bit of code here just to basically handle that. We then jump in and get to the core bits down here where we get our particular entity that we want to work with. So this will be either our invoice or our order, etc., like that. We run a little check just to make sure that it's a valid entity. So we just got a little method down here that basically just fires. So it's just a switch statement. If it's an entity that we're happy to work with because it's a sales entity, then we just let it move forward. If not, then we kick the user out at that particular point so the plugin doesn't fire any further. Then we get down here to the core logic down here. So what we've got here is at this point here, you would then do something similar to what we've got here. So you would determine, okay, well, you'd probably ask your question first in terms of, okay, do I want the logic to apply to all these entities? In which case, I probably don't need to differentiate between my specific entities. I'll just let the same calculations apply for all of them. If you don't want to do that, then instead you'll need to look at having a switch statement that's similar to this in terms of, that then lets you control, okay, where the logic fires and things like that. Okay, and then there's some just other stuff here in terms of exception handling and things like that. So this is essentially just the start solution. So if we deploy this out now, it's going to do nothing. It's got no logic attached to it whatsoever. So now if we go up to the complete solution up here, we can just sort of dive in and just take a look in a bit more detail in terms of what it's doing. So we'll jump into this particular method on here, the execute. Okay, so what we can see down here is that we've got some logic. We've done a switch statement where we're basically saying, okay, we want the logic to fire for these entities. We've basically split things out so that we calculate our sales document separately from our line items, which is why it's separated out like this. And it jumps down into the appropriate methods underneath to basically do all that. So if we take a look at one of these ones in particular, so if we do calculate line item down here, we can see the various logic that it's doing down here. It's doing some checks, it's basically getting the fields that it needs. In some cases, you will need to do potentially retrieval operations or have a plugin image attached to get the attributes that you want to work with. But in this case, we're just doing a retrieval around that. The logic in terms of making sure that the product has not been sold under cost is all handled underneath here. So all we do is that we just call a function just to check to see whether it's been sold under cost price, and then we just throw an error if that occurs. Then it just goes through and it's just setting the various amounts for all the different fields that we want to calculate as part of this. And then it's doing it. Then pretty much the sales document one is doing pretty much the same thing, but just at the sales level instead. So again, I'm not going to go through this in too great detail. It's just sort of doing all the various operations that we want as part of the plugin. A couple of more things just to mention in terms of the where is it now? Because there is some behavior that it is worth just focusing on for just a second. I think it's on the Yeah, pricing lot. Okay. So if you're working at the with either sort of your sales orders or your invoice details, at that point in the application, the users have the option, the capability of being able to lock the prices, which makes sense from a business process point of view. You know, if we are at the point where we've generated an invoice to a customer, we don't really want people to be going in modifying the prices, either lower or higher, because we have to reproduce documents and things like that. So to help you control that from a dynamics point of view, you can basically select a button that sort of goes, okay, these prices are locked, so therefore please don't change them. Now, you need to make sure that when you're writing from a custom pricing plugin perspective, you need to consider this and factor this in, because potentially when the calculate price message is always going to fire whenever a record is retrieved or looked at in the system by a particular user. And when it then tries to do the calculation, it tries to update and work with locked line item records, you start getting errors because read-only record deactivated or read-only records in the system, you can't write to them in any circumstance. You have to open them back up first before you can do anything with them. So essentially this function down here just basically just handles that. It just checks to make sure, okay, is the pricing locked on this particular entity? If the pricing is locked, then we just don't do any calculations whatsoever. We just sort of skip out completely. And we just treat whatever's been put on there and what has been locked as the correct value at the time it's been invoiced. Okay, so yeah, this whole solution on here is the complete solution. It's going to do all the requirements that we want on here. So at this point, we need to just get it deployed out into our dynamic system. So I'm just going to give the project just a quick build up here. You can see we're all up to date down here. And then I'm going to go out into the plugin registration tool, which has been downloaded and it's been added into my project already as a package. So if I was to just show you the folders down here, you can see this is my solution folder on here. I've got a folder here called packages. All of the Nuget assemblies and the tools have been added into here. So all I need to do is just go into here, into this folder here, into tools, and then I've got an executable down there for a plugin registration tool. Okay. So at this point then, we create a connection up into the application. So I just want to just get my sales environment up onto here. And at this point, we've got a few steps that we need to do within this tool in order to get things deployed out correctly. First of all, we need to get our assembly into the application. So just going to go register new assembly up here. Already scoped the folder on there. So I've got my DLL there. It's been built. I think it was built last night when I was testing it. So yes, that's all good to go. So it's just a single plugin with a single sort of step on there. So at this point, I'm just going to click register selected plugins. Get a message there to us, that's all good. So the DLL is effectively in there, but it's doing nothing at the moment. We need to now tell Dynamics, okay, please can you execute, for this message for, create or update, or in our case, calculate price message. So previously, in previous versions of applications, what you could actually do, and it would usually work, is that you could just do calculate price and then just have it fire on, just leave that blank on there and it would fire on all entities. I think they've changed something in version 9 moving forward. So typically what you have to do these days is actually tell it, okay, here are all of the entities that I want to use with this. So for example, the first one would be our opportunity entity. We want to make sure that this is triggered on post operation. It has to be that particular stage, otherwise things may start going wrong. At this point, register new step. And then bang, I've effectively now given the instruction to Dynamics to basically tell it, okay, whenever the calculate price message fires for opportunity, please run my code. So we're just going to add on a few more steps now. I won't add on all of them. I'm just obviously conscious of time today, but we will add on the remaining ones for our opportunity product or opportunity line, and then we'll do it for our quote as well, just so we can see that work. So just do this one by one. Yeah, calculate price. Post operation, register again. And then finally, we've got our quote product, quote detail. That does annoy me, the fact that they're always different in between the different entities. Yeah, so you see opportunity product, then quote detail. Winds me up, that. It really does. Anyway, okay, so we've given the instructions now. The plugin should fire, and all being well, things should start to work as we want them to from the pricing point of view. So at this point, we jump back into the application, and I'm going to create just a brand new opportunity record. So we're just going to do custom pricing test as the one on here. I'm going to associate a particular contact and account onto this one on here. I'm going to populate the discount percentage field, which should now work as we want it to in terms of being able to calculate that for us. Then at this point, I'm just going to click Save. So the record's been created. We've got no products on here, so we're all 0 here at the moment. So let's just add on a product at this point. We need a price list, of course. So CRM service on there. Save that. And we'll add on a product. So we can see that discount percentages have been mapped through. That's been done via relationship mappings, so nothing too fancy going on there. So again, we'll just do another writing product. So we'll just do my awesome writing product. Because it's so awesome, it costs £780 and we want 20 of it. So let's save that. And we can see that now we've got the calculations are working again, because at this point it's now processing our custom pricing logic as we want it to. And we can see on here that it's been able to get the total amounts. It's done the multiplication on there. It's been able to figure out in terms of what the manual discount should be based on the percentage that we supplied. I think that looks right to me. I might be wrong, but if we can just test this around, 50% should be able to tell if that's right. Yep, that's definitely right. Or if we wanted to, we could give 100% discount. I wouldn't recommend that though. Let's just set that back to 25. So that's all working. Every time we save the record, the change is being applied. If we were to now go back into our opportunity record, so I think up here, again, we can see down here that it's been able to total all of that up as we wanted to. We've also got as well, freight amount is now populating as well. So what it's been able to do on this particular point here is if we go back onto the account that we've associated, so A-Datum Corporation, we can see that they've got an address 1 city value of Redmond down there. So what the plugin is actually doing is it's going off into this freight amount entity on here, and it's detecting, okay, this is actually from Redmond, so therefore it's going to be £2.50 as the freight amount that we need to calculate. That's probably a little bit cheap from where I am getting out to Redmond in the USA, so let's just maybe just change that up a bit. Change it to maybe, it won't be that much, but let's make it a big amount just so we can see. If I now go back in and open up the record, it should get me my newly correct freight amount. I think I have to go back into my product itself. Let's just make a change on here. Do 25. Let's just go back onto the opportunity. Okay, something might be going wrong on there. Might be that it's not firing at the correct particular points, but yeah, ideally you'd have it set up so that whenever you make a change or an update on there, whenever you then open up the record again, it picks up the correct freight amount. But we can see that's all working. If we were to jump into the particular code, we can see the bit that probably does that. I think it's under calculate line item freight down here. Yeah, so all it's doing is it's basically jumping on the associated account record, getting the city value, then comparing that to what is in the freight amount entity, bringing that back, and then putting that back on as we want it to. There's also some logic in there that sets it to 25 by default. It could be that maybe it's hitting that and I've not set things up correctly on that one. So, but it's working. It's setting our freight amount for us and it's giving us some good capabilities on there. So that's pretty much it in terms of the demo. So as I say, things have been condensed down just a little bit. Typically, your development cycle will be a lot longer. I think if you wanted to go away and see in detail what you can do with this. Look at the sample, go through it in your own time, adapt it to suit your particular needs. But hopefully what you've been able to see here gives you an insight into terms of how we can use custom pricing plugins to our advantage, and in the process, get our calculations working really nicely in the sales module. Okay, so jump back into the slides for just a few minutes. Okay, so before we jump into questions and the like, just some things that I just want to just highlight. Okay, if you have been interested after today, you are wanting to go away and implement something similar for yourself, so some of the things that I'd probably just advise you just to keep an eye on. So we touched upon this earlier in terms of we've got a specific bit of the code that creates a shared variable in the system. A shared variable is something that can be accessed by multiple plugins to basically share, well, do what it says in the tin, share values of potential interest across different plugin executions. So we have to have a specific step in the plugin code to basically set that shared variable and make sure that we check it at the same time, because what happens otherwise is that potentially the application gets into an infinite loop. It tries to constantly recalculate the records. Every time it recalculates, it triggers another recalculation, and then just repeats itself endlessly. So make sure you leave that bit of code in if you are potentially taking this forward yourself, because you will hit that issue in the future. Now, if you're in a situation where you're using project service automation alongside the sales module, from a custom pricing standpoint, things could start to get a bit tricky. PSA does a whole load of stuff around the sales modules. It has its own set of plugins and functionality that fires, its own set of custom fields as well, and logic and things like that. So really, it does complicate things to a certain extent when you're then looking at a custom pricing solution, because you do have to sometimes figure out and work around some of the idiosyncrasies that PSA brings to the table. Just keep that in mind. If you have got PSA or are using PSA, then a custom pricing could be a bit more of a challenge for you to adopt. So an example there, PSA has a requirement where totals are enforced. That at a product line item, your totals must tally up with any related line item detail records. It adds on a few custom entities and other things to basically do what it needs to do. And then when you don't meet the requirements for that, or more correctly, your custom pricing plugin code doesn't meet those requirements, you start getting all sorts of nasty errors. So just keep that in mind. If you are potentially implementing a custom pricing plugin for an on-premise and you're thinking of moving it online in the future, that's great. It should be something that's supported, but just keep in mind that you just need to be making sure that you are developing the plugin, that's going to be compliant with with the sandbox effectively. So making sure that the plugin's running in the sandbox mode. It's not doing anything naughty in terms of calling custom DLLs or doing stuff that it shouldn't supposed to do. You get a bit more flexibility on premise in doing that sort of stuff, but in the online world, it can potentially catch you out if you're not careful. Now, say recent, they've been around now, I think, for the year. I think as with any custom code, custom solution involving Dynamics 365, where you're triggering additional API operations, you do need to be considerate towards the new service limits that are in place. And most importantly, making sure that you've got the licensing around that to support the anticipated number of API operations that potentially you're going to be doing. So I think as with any plugin development, make sure that you're limiting the amount of API calls that your plugin's performing. Make sure it's streamlined and optimized where possible. And if you are potentially going to be, it's going to be a large deployment, maybe from a licensing standpoint, you're going to be hitting those API limits, and you are thinking about a custom pricing solution, then you probably need to just step back for a second and just review that first before you move forward, because you could potentially find yourself in a situation where you're going over with the API limits and you're getting I'm not sure what happens at the moment, but you probably get an email from Microsoft telling you that you're breaching the service limits, or they just cut you off potentially because you're just throttling things so much. And I think finally, I think it's probably clear just to be clear in terms of what a custom pricing solution will not do. So for example, if you've got some custom entities that you're bringing into the party as part of your sales calculations, so maybe doing something similar to PSA, where you've got an additional entity linked to your line item records, that's great, that's fine. From a pricing plugin point of view, you can certainly work and interact with those entities, but the calculate price message is not supported for custom entities. You can't use it with any other entities apart from the ones that we've discussed already. Just keep that in mind. Obviously, because it's a plugin, it will be subject to the same limitations. So alluded to it already around the sandbox if you're online. So you're going to have things such as 2-minute execution, limitation around some custom DLLs, and things like that. And the thing that could potentially be troublesome. So perhaps you're in a situation where, okay, for quote an opportunity, let's say, okay, the default system pricing works great, works absolutely fine. I just want to change it for my invoice and orders. A custom pricing solution, you can't have both of that. It's either a case of you go with the custom pricing solution or you go with the default pricing. There's no middle ground. So really, if you are in a situation where you are wanting to sort of have that scenario where you're doing out of the box or close to out of the box with some entities and something completely different for everything else, then there will be some work that you need to do in terms of effectively replicating what the system does out of the box using the C# code. Okay, so before we sort of wrap up, before we sort of jump into questions, then I think a custom pricing solution, potentially, any organization that's moving to a system like Dynamics, there's going to be situations where things just don't fit quite right, where you're having to do functional customizations, changing things around and things like that just to suit the particular need. So really, a custom pricing solution potentially becomes quite invaluable when you're looking at how the out of the box calculations work and it just doesn't fit well for your particular need. So for those situations, I think it does certainly have its merits. It's not necessarily a potentially a cakewalk. There are some code examples that Microsoft provided. Hopefully the sample that is on the GitHub page will be quite useful if you've got a little bit of C# knowledge. So there will be some effort around it, but hopefully getting up and running with it isn't too much of a challenge. And we've seen today that it can be fairly quick to do as well. Mention it again, API limits, just always focus and be aware in terms of what any custom code that you're writing for Dynamics 365 Sales, just keep in mind that it's not doing the stuff that is going to be causing you problems from an API limit point of view, or just doing unnecessary API calls. Have a real focus around your code and what it's doing, and focus it towards quality and things like that. And at the end of the day, I'm not going to lie in terms of saying, okay, well, custom pricing solution, it's great. Let's do all these wonderful things that we talked about today, but it is introducing a degree of complexity. At the end of the day, you are adding custom code into your system, and in these days of sort of where we're trying to go for more low code functional type solutions, it's going to add some baggage, as part of that. So the thing around that is just to make sure that you're going with your eyes open in that regard, making sure from a business point of view that you're managing that in terms of, either from a documentation point of view, from a resourcing standpoint, you've got yourself equipped so that you can, potentially manage the fact that you've got custom code deployed out into the system, making sure that it's being tested regularly, making sure that it's been written well, ensuring that as part of upgrade testing, because you're getting updates a lot more frequently now, that nothing breaks as part of that. Just make sure you're prepared from that standpoint. But I'm not going to lie to you and sort of say, oh, it's great, it's simple, it's just blah, 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 as we've seen today. No, it is going to introduce a degree of complexity, so always keep that in mind with custom pricing plugins. Okay, so there's some further reading on there. I think we'll get the slides shared out after today, so hopefully you'll get this through. But I've just put a few links on here. There's some good Microsoft Doc articles available that talks about the subject in detail. It's also a subject that I've blogged about quite a few times in the past, particularly around some of the things around, PSA and things like that, things to watch out for, how you can do certain specific things with your custom pricing plugins. So if you are interested, feel free to check those out, and hopefully you'll find them useful. Okay, so I think we've got about 10 minutes to spare. So yeah, I'd be happy to answer any questions there are.
Hello there, Joe. And once again,
Hello.
thanks so much. Great, fantastic session. Lots of great feedback. Ricardo just said that you've helped him for an ongoing project. Big thank you.
Oh, wow. Wow. Great.
So
That's always
Ricardo
good to hear.
Kasaka is saying, yeah, you've just helped him for his project. The next one is Dominique Jaya is saying you can use North 52 if you don't want to develop code. Yes, that's true. Yeah, I mean, you could also, in fact, Joe, I mean, I'm thinking, did you use Synchronous? Sorry, I missed yours. I missed first bit of your session as I was covering some other issues. Did you mention you're using Synchronous plugin executions?
Yeah, so this particular sample is using Synchronous plugins. Yeah.
Got you right. Okay, because obviously, Joe, I'm sure you'd also recommend to the audience that if there wasn't a requirement for Synchronous, then you potentially they could have used a flow, possibly, than having to develop a plugin.
Yeah, I think there's all sorts of debates about this these days. You know, I think even Microsoft say, you know, you should be in most scenarios where you think you're going to need something synchronous, you could probably get away with doing it as, you know, like you say, as a Power Automate flow instead and stuff like that. So certainly, you know, if it can meet your needs, then again, disable the custom pricing, and then a Power Automate flow would probably meet your needs there.
So Coquelin is asking, I found deploying plugins using Developer Toolkit is a lot easier, but in your demo, you deployed using Plugin Registration Tool. Is there any particular reason for not using the Developer Toolkit?
It's just personal preference for me. Unless I'm mistaken, is the Developer Toolkit supported now for Visual Studio 2019?
It's not officially supported. It's not actually officially supported, no.
This is it. I like to be on the latest stuff. That's
yeah, true.
Yeah.
So I mean, look, I mean, the developer toolkit is a nice thing to have, but unfortunately, a lot of the time you just can't use it for. I mean, there are hacks to get it to work, but yeah, I mean, I myself use the plugin registration tool versus the toolkit. And Dominique is saying, can we use the solution you provided on the mobile Dynamics 365 offline?
Oh, good question. So I think from memory, plugins do execute offline, don't they? If it's Outlook, the old Outlook app, I think it does a playback when you synchronize it up. I think it would be a case of with the when as soon as you effectively go back online and the record hits Dynamics, I think at that point, yeah, it's a platform level operation. It'll be a create, an update, whatever. So therefore, yes, it should execute at that particular point.
No, what's Coquelin is saying? No, it's officially supported only. Yep, that's fine. Yep, that's regarding the Visual Studio. Yep, okay. So I guess that's all the questions, I believe. Any other questions for Joe? And whilst we're waiting for any other questions, Joe, look, you've been in lots of. I mean, Joe, I think you've been doing nearly every week or something close to that. I mean, tell us a bit about what you're up to lately.
Oh, I'm quite busy. I'm head deep in Azure at the moment. So doing just in the middle of quite a big project at the moment involving lots of sort of complicated integrations and stuff like that. So actually been writing quite a lot of code for a change, which is quite good. But no, it's good that these events are happening every weekend at the moment. It just seems to be so much stuff at the moment. It's just amazing. So much good content.
And thank you, Joe, because you've been obviously supporting a lot of the effort, doing many sessions throughout, especially over this period. So again, big thank you. Your sessions are highly relevant, and I think everyone clearly appreciates them. I think Coquelin is saying thanks, Dominique, and everyone is saying big thank you. Remember to reach out to Joe. Joe's website, crmchat.co.uk, as well as his Twitter and LinkedIn. By the way, Joe, LinkedIn, I think it's hard for people to connect with you on LinkedIn. I think it requires some extra validation. I think it requires your email address, actually. I think it is. But I just thought I'd let you know it's not so straightforward to connect with you on LinkedIn, just so you're aware.
Yes, I think I put something on. I think I was bombarded with unwelcome ones a few years back, so I'll see if I can get rid of that. But yeah, if you just feel free to connect to me on there or just drop me a message, and yeah, I'd be happy to connect with any of you on the call today.
Great stuff. So that was Joe Griffin. Fantastic, doing great stuff for the community. So once again, thanks again, Joe, for everything you do. Lots of great sessions, and I know that's helped a lot of you with your particular scenarios, overcoming the limitations of the out of the box pricing module within inside of Dynamics. Often many people have limitations that have to overcome, and so it is a good solution to implement. Again, Joe also mentioned that there are nuances and things you have to be very, very careful of, but as long as you consider that and you can deliver your customer requirements. So again, big thanks to Joe. Make sure you connect with him.
Great. Thank you very much. I'll be in the chat, so feel free to drop me a message if you've got any more questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. So again, due to the COVID situation, we've had to kind of restructure stuff. So next up is Vicky. So for those who aren't aware,